Settling into my seat on the plane, I stared out the window as the aircraft climbed higher into the clouds, carrying me back home for good. After 30 long years, I had finally decided it was time to retire, spurred by my love for my wife, Emily. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my old Zippo lighter, a gift from her. It bore the inscription, "To my beloved husband, James." "Congratulations, Marine." "That's me, James Carter, or as the guys used to call me, Machine Weapon Rob, thanks to my rank as gunnery sergeant. Today, though, I added a new title to my resume, retired. For over 3 decades, I'd served my country in the military, wearing a uniform decorated with ribbons and badges that carried meaning only I truly understood. A good chunk of that time, more than 10 years, was in the reserves. I'd done it all, seen it all, and bought all the t-shirts. When Emily and I first got married, I was already in solid shape. I'd met her years ago in the most random way, on the side of the road after work. Back then, I was a mechanic at a large dealership in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. One evening, I saw her car pulled over with steam pouring from under the hood. I offered to take a look and figured it out right away, a snapped fan belt. After a quick trip to the parts store and some roadside repairs, she was ready to hit the road. "Thank you so much," she said with genuine gratitude. "I thought I'd never make it back to Spokane." "Just get home safely," I told her, thinking that would be the end of it. But she surprised me. "Let me repay you," she said insistently. "How about dinner? Do you like Red Lobster?" I hesitated for half a second, but why not? "I love Red Lobster," I replied. She flashed me a dazzling smile and scribbled down her name and number. "Great," she said. "How about Friday at 7? That dinner changed my life. By the time 8 months rolled around, I was down on one knee, asking her to marry me. We tied the knot in 1987, and from that day on, I thought I was the luckiest man alive. Emily moved into my family home in northern Idaho, even though it meant an extra 30 miles tacked onto her commute to Spokane Valley, where she worked as a teacher. We thought about moving closer to her school, but I couldn't bear to leave the house. It was nestled on 5 wooded acres off I-95, a gift from my parents, and I hope to pass it down to our kids someday. Despite my monthly reserve obligations and the annual training sessions, Emily never seemed to mind. She supported me in every way, from standing by me during deployments to quietly depositing small checks into my IRA to ensure our future was secure. When our daughter, Sophie, arrived about a year and a half into our marriage, I thought life couldn't get better. But then came our son, Daniel, not long after I returned from active duty during the Gulf War. September 11th turned our world upside down. I went back to active duty, splitting my time between Camp Pendleton and Camp Lejeune, while Emily, ever the resourceful one, found teaching jobs wherever we landed. I did 3 tours in Iraq, 3 in Afghanistan, and 4 in Okinawa, racking up more than 6 years of deployments. Emily held the fort at home, raising our kids alone for months, sometimes years on end. She didn't complain, but I could see the strain etched on her face every time I returned. This last deployment, I promised, would be my final one. At 56, I knew desert warfare was a young man's game. It was time to go home. Some people might think I'd have climbed higher up the ranks after all those years, and they're probably right. But I was the kind of Marine who valued camaraderie over ambition. I liked having a beer with the guys and always had their backs, even when it cost me promotions. My troops knew they could count on me, and that's all that mattered. At my retirement party, even Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, who had once chewed me out, showed up to shake my hand and give me a commendation. "The Corps won't be the same without you, Gunny," he said. "Thanks, Colonel," I replied, smiling, "but I'm sure it's in good hands." One of the younger Marines, Lance Corporal Miller, handed me a small package wrapped in brown paper. "A little something to remember us by, Gunny Rob," he said with a grin. Inside was a hand-carved wooden hand flipping the bird, complete with the Marine Corps emblem and our unit designation on the back. I laughed and held it up. "You carved this yourself, Miller?" I asked, impressed. He beamed. "Sure did, Gunny." "Hell of a job," I told him. "I'll treasure it forever." After shaking hands and saying my goodbyes, I left the base with my gear in tow, ready to start this new chapter. As the plane descended over Spokane, I gazed out at the city below, the river, the waterfall, Riverfront Park, and the Expo 74 Pavilion. It all looked the same, but I felt different. Memories of sunny afternoons with Emily and the kids flooded my mind, and I couldn't wait to see her face again. When I stepped off the plane and into the airport, I scanned the crowd for Emily. She wasn't there. Strange. I grabbed my bags and tried calling her. No answer. I texted her, "Where are you?" Still nothing. I tried her cell again, but it went straight to voicemail. A sense of unease crept over me. I called home, but all I got was the answering machine. "God," I whispered, my heart pounding. "Please let her be okay." I called her parents next, but they hadn't heard from her either. Her mom offered to come get me, but I declined. "She's probably stuck in traffic," I reasoned. "I'll let you know if I need a ride." As I stood there, a stranger approached. "Need a lift, Gunny?" he asked, gesturing toward a white SUV. "I thought my wife was picking me up," I admitted. "Where to?" he asked. "Idaho," I replied, "near Athol and Bayview." "I'm headed that way," the man said, motioning to his white SUV. "Better than waiting for a cab?" "Thanks," I said, tossing my bags into the back. "Let me at least cover your gas." He waved it off. "Company cards, got it," he replied with a grin. Climbing in, I buckled up. "Vacation?" he guessed as we hit the road. "Retirement," I said. 30 years in. Time to take it easy." "Long day," he observed. "Name's Mark Harris, by the way." "You can say that again," I replied, sending Emily a quick text. "Got a ride. TC is home?" "So, what's the plan now that you're retired?" he asked. "Fishing, hunting, and finally spending time with the wife," I answered, forcing a smile. "I hear you," he said. "I retired from the Army after 25 years as a lieutenant colonel. But let me tell you, retirement's not all it's cracked up to be." "What do you do now?" I asked. "I run a camp for men up north," he said. "A camp?" I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of camp?" "It's for guys facing personal struggles, infidelity, divorce, that kind of thing," he explained. That struck a nerve, but I kept my reaction in check. "Sounds intense," I said. "It is. 3 months, like boot camp. It's transformative for those who stick with it." "Ever been a drill instructor?" I asked. "Paris Island," he replied. "Promoted to staff sergeant there." "Then you know how to push people," I said. "We do," he said, nodding. "In fact, I've been approved to bring in a senior instructor, someone to oversee staff, welcome new students, and manage the program." I frowned, realizing where this was going. "And you think that someone's me?" "Yes," Mark said. "The company's been watching you for a while." "Watching me?" I asked, wary. "You're a local, a combat vet with a solid record," he explained. "Despite a couple of bar incidents, you're exactly what we need." "And the catch?" I asked. Mark handed me a folder. "Take a look." I opened it, my stomach churning as I saw the evidence. The report detailed Emily's affair with her school principal, Stephen Blake, spanning over 2 decades. My hands tightened as I flipped through the photos and transcripts. Then I slid the included DVD into the SUV's player. On the screen, Emily and Stephen were in a motel room. "Where did you get this?" I asked, my voice cold. "When we vet potential hires, we look at everything," Mark said. "That includes personal life. I assume you didn't know?" "No," I said, feeling a pit form in my stomach. "Not a clue. How do you know it's been going on for 20 years? "Our investigators are thorough," he replied. They pieced it together from her conversations and their meeting history. It all made sense now. Her frequent trips to Spokane, her excuses while I was deployed. "What about my kids?" I asked, dreading the answer. "They're yours," Mark assured me. "We confirmed it through DNA testing." Relief mixed with rising anger. "Figures she didn't show up at the airport," I muttered bitterly. Mark nodded. "Our investigators say they meet regularly after school. Once a week, they even drive out to your house." 70 miles round trip for an affair," I said, shaking my head. "How could she?" "It happens," Mark said softly. "War changes people. Time apart puts a strain on even the best marriages." "What now?" I asked. "If this checks out, divorce is my only option." "Agreed," Mark said. And him? I growled. I'd love to make him pay, but I won't risk jail. There are other ways, Mark said. Everything you need is in that folder. Blake's married, with kids who don't know about the affair. You've got options. You swear this is accurate? I pressed. I wouldn't have shown it to you if I doubted it, he replied. I'm sorry, Gunny. You don't deserve this. Who does? I muttered. Well said, Mark agreed as we pulled into my driveway. Nice place, he remarked, admiring the house. You're really off the beaten path. Thanks, I said. Thought Emily and I would retire here together. Looks like it's just me now. Mark handed me a business card. Call me when you're ready, he said. Come to the camp. We'll talk, give you a tour, and introduce you to the team. But take care of this first, he added, nodding at the folder. I will, I said, gripping the card. Thanks, Mark, for everything. We shook hands, and I watched him drive off before heading inside. The house was spotless, as always, a hallmark of Emily's. She may be a cheating strumpet, I muttered, but at least she keeps the house clean. I unpacked upstairs, changed into jeans and a t-shirt, and sat down with the folder. I needed to see everything. Sliding the DVD into the player, I braced myself. On the screen, Stephen leaned toward Emily in the motel room. When are you leaving him? He asked. I don't know, she replied, looking annoyed. Probably not until he retires. If you play your cards right, Stephen said, you could get half his retirement checks and most of his savings. That's her plan, I muttered, shaking my head. Good thing she signed the prenup. When Emily and I first got married, my dad had the estate paperwork ready. When he passed, all I needed to do was add her name. That thought soured as I stared at the evidence of her betrayal. I had heard enough. Grabbing the phone book, I looked up a family law attorney and made an appointment for the next morning. It wasn't too late to start sorting this mess out. Heading upstairs, I gathered a few of Emily's things, tossing them into bags, and set them by the front door. If she wants to leave, I'll make it easy for her, I thought bitterly. Then, I flopped onto the couch, staring at the ceiling, reflecting on our years together. As far as I knew, things between us had been fine, normal, even. Sure, we had the usual ups and downs that every marriage has, but nothing that couldn't be worked through. I'd always joked that if Emily ever cheated on me, it'd be with someone more impressive than me, someone taller, stronger, better looking. But Stephen? The thought of her settling for someone who looked like a marshmallow on legs actually made me laugh, despite everything. Then another thought hit me. All these years, she'd never mentioned that our intimacy had been causing her pain. I shook my head. Even now, there were layers to her that I couldn't comprehend. Needing to clear my head, I wandered into my office. On a shelf in my tool cabinet was an unopened package of duct tape. Nearby was a set of zip ties. As I stared at them, an idea began forming. I grabbed the supplies and closed the cabinet, then went to my weapon locker. From inside, I took out an old .45 pistol, ensuring it was empty. This wasn't going to end the way they thought it would. I set everything on the dining room table, made a sandwich, grabbed a beer, and waited. The sun dipped below the horizon as I heard a car pull into the garage. Their giggles and muffled voices were unmistakable. A moment later, the door opened, and they stepped inside. Neither noticed me sitting at the table until they reached the main room. Emily froze, her eyes widening. James, she exclaimed, trying to mask her shock. When did you get home? Didn't you get my emails and messages? Her words spilled out in a rush. Sorry, my phone battery died. Things aren't what they seem, James, trust me. Really? I interrupted. So you're not here with Stephen to fool around in our bed? Stephen stiffened, his face pale. He started to step forward, but I raised the pistol and he froze. Don't, I said flatly. The gun wasn't loaded, but they didn't know that. Stephen's face went white as a sheet, and a dark stain spread across the front of his pants. I smirked. Well, look at that. Wet yourself, huh? Pathetic. Please, don't do this, he stammered. Oh God, please. Shut up, I snapped. You thought you could mess with another man's wife for over 20 years and get away with it? Not today. Against the tree now. Stephen stumbled toward the tree in the yard. Hands behind your back. Face forward, I ordered. Then, turning to Emily, I tossed her the duct tape. Tie him up. I want nothing visible but his eyes and nose. Move. Her hands shook as she obeyed, carefully wrapping the tape around him. Hurry up. I barked. She sped up, encircling the tree until the first roll was gone. I tossed her the second. Keep going. By the time she finished, Stephen was cocooned in duct tape, barely able to move. Only his wide, frightened eyes and the tip of his nose peeked out. I stepped closer, ensuring the tape held. Satisfied, I pulled out my cell phone and dialed a number from the report Mark had given me. Blake residence, a woman answered. Judy speaking. Mrs. Blake, I said. My name is James Carter. Is your husband home? No, she replied. He has a meeting with the teachers at school. Can I take a message? That won't be necessary, I said evenly. The truth is, he's at my house with my wife. I think you should come and get him. There was a pause. What is he doing at your house with your wife? Judy asked sharply. They were planning to have sex, I said bluntly. But they've been caught. What? She shrieked. Is this some kind of sick joke? No, ma'am, I said. Your husband and my wife have been having an affair for over 20 years. That son of a, she exploded. I'm coming to get him. Where are you? I gave her directions to my house. I'll be there as fast as I can, she promised before hanging up. I pocketed my phone and turned to Stephen, whose eyes were darting in panic. Don't go anywhere, I said dryly. We'll deal with you in a bit. Inside, I gestured for Emily to sit on the couch. I grabbed the remote for the TV and DVD player. How long has this been going on? I asked, keeping my tone calm. And don't lie. I already know more than you think. Emily lowered her head. A while, she admitted softly. How long is a while? I pressed. A month? A year? 10 years? 20? Her voice was barely audible. Longer. I clenched my jaw. Longer, I repeated. When did it start? Around 1995, she whispered. We worked together for years. It only happened when you were gone. Gone, I said bitterly. Like all the times I was overseas? She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Yes. I'm sorry, Emily stammered. I never meant to hurt you. You weren't supposed to find out. I stared at her, my blood boiling. So, while I was overseas fighting terrorists and getting shot at, you were here rolling around with that in our bed? I gestured toward the door where Stephen was taped to the tree. She broke into sobs. Stop crying, I snapped. Answer the damn question. She wiped her face, nodding. Yes, she whispered. But please, James, we can get past this. Can't you give me another chance? I barked out a laugh. Get through this? Are you kidding me? You think I should just forget you've been cheating for 2 decades? Give me one good reason not to throw you out right now. It doesn't have to ruin us, she insisted. I don't want a divorce. I smirked. I'd heard her plans with Stephen. Too late for that, I said. I'm seeing a lawyer tomorrow. Her expression turned icy. You don't want to do that, she said, folding her arms. Stephen told me that if you divorce me, I can take half your pension, the house, and everything else. I laughed and pulled out the prenup from the folder Mark had given me. There's just one problem with that, I said, holding it up. Remember this? The ironclad prenup you signed? You get nothing but what the document allows. The house? Mine. It was willed to me by my parents. The prenup states that in the event of infidelity, you get 40% of the joint savings. No alimony. I keep all my retirement contributions. That's it. Her face twisted in anger. I'll fight you. I figured you'd say that, I said, grabbing the remote. I pointed it at the TV and pressed play. The screen flickered to life, showing a video of her and Stephen in the motel room. Her face turned ashen, and she clapped a hand over her mouth. Oh my God, she gasped. How did you get this? Please turn it off. I shook my head. Doesn't matter how I got it. What matters is what your school board will think when they see it. Her voice rose in panic. I'll lose my job. So will Stephen. Please, James, don't do this. Then you'll sign the papers when they come, I said firmly. Defeated, she nodded. I fast-forwarded to the part where she complained to Steven that I was too big for her. Pausing the video, I turned to her. Can you explain this to me? All these years, not a single complaint. Why didn't you say anything? She looked away, embarrassed. I didn't want to hurt your feelings, she admitted. At first, I liked it. You always turned me on. But after a while, it started to hurt. And that's why you started making excuses to avoid me? I asked. She nodded. Yes, she said. I'm sorry. You keep saying that, I said coldly. I grabbed her purse, rifling through it for her keys and wallet. I removed her house keys and credit cards, but left her Spokane Teachers Credit Union card. She had her own savings account there from her teaching salary. If you need money, use that, I said, tossing her purse back onto the couch. She stared at me, stunned. I guess I should pack and leave, she muttered. Not yet, I said. You still need to explain this to your parents and our kids. They deserve to know why we're divorcing. Please don't make me do that, she begged, tears streaming down her face. They'll hate me. Too bad, I said, reaching for my phone. I was about to call her parents when headlights swept across the driveway. Looks like Judy's here, I said. You can start by explaining to her why you entertained her husband. A knock sounded at the door, and I opened it to find a woman about my age, slightly younger. Her jeans hugged her figure perfectly, and I noticed she was sizing me up as much as I was her. You must be James Carter, she said, her eyes lingering briefly before she glanced behind me. That's right. And you're Judy Blake. For the moment, she said with a wry smile. Come in, I said, stepping aside. Where's that piece of crap hiding? She demanded. I smiled. I liked her already. He's a little tied up right now, I said. But don't worry, he's not going anywhere. Her eyes darted to Emily, and her face twisted with anger. You, she spat. You're the one screwing my soon-to-be ex-husband? Of course. Emily Conroy. I should have known. Please stop, Emily cried. Shut up, you strumpet. Judy snapped. You've been cheating on this gorgeous man with the Pillsbury Doughboy? How does that even make sense? She turned back to me. Where is he? I motioned toward the yard. I'll take you. Before leading her out, I stepped into my office and grabbed a box cutter, a bottle of 90% isopropyl alcohol, and a rag. Outside, I gestured toward the tree. Judy burst into laughter when she saw Steven duct-taped in place, only his eyes and nose visible. You've got style, James, she said, still chuckling. This is perfect. Steven whimpered, and I saw pure terror in his eyes as Judy approached. You're a disgusting creep, she spat at him, yanking off her wedding rings and tossing them on the ground. You haven't touched me in months, and now I know why. She turned back to me. James, I like the way you handle things. You're someone I don't want to mess with. I pulled out the box cutter and sliced through the duct tape, binding Steven to the tree. As the last layer fell away, he crumpled to the ground, groaning and squirming in discomfort. I stepped back, my eyes fixed on Emily. Okay, I barked at Steven. Get up and get your sorry ass back in the house. He scrambled awkwardly to his feet, clutching at his arms, clearly trying to restore circulation. Judy stood nearby, arms crossed, smirking. This is more fun than I've had in years, she remarked, watching Steven stumble toward the house like a scared dog. Emily turned to me, tears streaking her face. Please, James, she begged. Haven't you done enough? No, I said, coldly. You're going to call your mother. Put her on speakerphone. Her trembling hands fumbled with the phone, and she hesitated for a moment before dialing. When her mother answered, Emily's voice cracked. Mom, it's me. Emily, her mom said, concern creeping into her tone. What's wrong? Are you hurt? Emily hesitated, glancing at me, her face streaked with tears. Mom, James is kicking me out of the house. What? Why would he do that? Her mom asked, confusion quickly turning to worry. Emily broke into fresh sobs. Because he found out I cheated on him. The line went silent for a moment before her mother's voice came back, sharp with anger. You what? You stupid cow. How could you do something so awful to your husband? James has been nothing but good to you. I thought I raised you better than this. What the hell is wrong with you? Emily could barely speak through her sobs. Mom, please, can I stay with you for a while? Her mother sighed heavily. I suppose, but not for too long. And no men. Emily, do you understand me? Yes, Mom. Thank you, Emily said weakly. James, her mom called out. Are you there? I'm here, Mom, I replied. I'd always liked Emily's parents, and I'd called them Mom and Dad since we got married. I'm so sorry, son, she said, her voice full of regret. You didn't deserve this. Thank you, Mom, I said. It's hard, but I'll get through it. Please stay in touch, she said before ending the call. I turned to Emily. You've got 2 more calls to make. She shook her head, crying harder. Please, James, don't make me do this. Why not? I snapped. They deserve to know the truth. Emily wiped her face and dialed Daniel's number. When he picked up, her voice was shaky. Hi, Daniel. It's Mom. Hey, Mom. Are you okay? He asked. No, she said softly. Your dad and we're getting a divorce. What? Daniel exclaimed. Why? Did Dad cheat on you? Emily hesitated, glancing at me before forcing out the truth. No, Daniel. I cheated on your father, and he found out. The silence on the line was suffocating. Then Daniel's voice came back, laced with disappointment. Mom, how could you? Is Dad there? I'm here, son, I said. And before you ask, I'm fine. Your mother has been doing this for over 20 years. I only found out today. Oh my God, Dad, Daniel said. I'm so sorry. Emily's voice cracked. I'm sorry, Daniel. Yeah, sorry you got caught, Daniel said harshly. I can't believe you did that to Dad. I need to go. I'll talk to you later. He hung up without another word. Emily dropped the phone onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. One more call, I said, my tone unrelenting. Her hands trembled as she dialed Sophie. This call went even worse. Sophie's voice, sharp and fiery, came through the speaker. You stupid cow, she shouted when Emily confessed. How could you betray Dad like that? I don't know who you are anymore. Sophie, please, Emily begged. I made a mistake. Mistake? Sophie hissed. This wasn't a mistake. It was 20 years of lies. You're not my mother right now. Don't even think about seeing my kids until you've sorted your crap out. Emily sobbed as Sophie ended the call abruptly. Are you starting to understand the consequences of your actions? I asked, my voice cutting. You didn't just betray me. You've destroyed our family. 2 families, actually. Emily wiped her face with shaking hands. I told you I was sorry, she whispered. Everyone hates me now. You reap what you sow, I said, my voice cold and detached. It's time for you to leave. Your bags are packed. You can arrange to pick up the rest of your things later. Emily nodded numbly and went upstairs to grab the suitcase and overnight bag I'd packed. As she came down the stairs, Judy stepped forward, blocking the door. Wait a second, Judy said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. So let me get this straight. You've been cozying up to my husband for over 20 years? Emily avoided her gaze, staring at the floor. Yes, she mumbled. Well then, Judy said with a smirk, I guess you won't mind if I take your man. Been a long time since I've been with a real one, and James looks more than capable. Emily dropped her suitcase, her face crumpling. Please, don't, she pleaded, her voice breaking. Don't do this to me. I shrugged, playing along. Why not? It's the best offer I've had lately. Why should cheaters have all the fun? Judy chuckled darkly. Exactly. Emily let out a defeated sob, grabbing her bags and heading for the door. Judy grabbed Stephen by the collar. And you, she spat, don't even think about stepping into my house. Sleep in your car or find a motel. I don't care. But don't come back. Stephen nodded meekly. Crystal, he muttered, shuffling toward the door. Emily glanced at me one last time. I'm sorry, James. For everything. Goodbye. With that, she walked out, leaving the house and my life. As her car disappeared, Judy turned to me. You okay? She asked. I wiped my eyes quickly. Yeah, just something in my eye. Judy smirked. Crap, she murmured, amused. So what now? I chuckled, shaking my head. That's the big question, isn't it? How do you walk away from 30 years? You open yourself to new possibilities, Judy said simply. I nodded. What about you? Did you know about him? I had my suspicions, she admitted. Perfume on his clothes, odd hours. I figured this might happen, but I didn't have proof. So, I said, leaning against the wall, what's your next move? I'm not sure, Judy admitted with a sigh when I asked her about her next steps. I've always been a stay-at-home wife and mom. That's all I ever wanted. My mom raised me old school. She believed the best job for a woman was homemaker. I married straight out of high school, never had a paying job, and just focused on keeping my husband happy and raising the kids. I nodded, sensing her frustration but also her resolve. You'll figure it out, I said. You seem like someone who knows how to bounce back. Judy smiled faintly. Thanks. I guess I'll have to. Did you mean what you said earlier? About love and all that? I asked cautiously. She chuckled. I don't say things I don't mean, James. Would you like to stay over? I offered. I'd enjoy the company. Judy hesitated, her eyes searching mine. Are you sure? Absolutely, I assured her. Then I suppose I wouldn't mind, she agreed, her tone softening. That night, Judy and I shared a connection I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just about physical closeness. It was comfort, understanding, and shared pain. Before drifting off to sleep, I turned to her. If you felt like this, why'd you stick with him all those years? She sighed. Believe it or not, I loved him once. He was good to me and the kids, for a while anyway. I get it, I said. I loved Emily too. Part of me probably always will, but I can't tolerate what she did. Exactly, she agreed. For me, the marriage is done. So, what's next? I wondered aloud. You mean for us? She clarified. I nodded. Well, she began thoughtfully, I like you, James Carter. I'd like to see where this goes. I'd like that too, I said, a small smile forming. She smiled back. All right then. The next morning, I woke to Judy's cheerful voice. Good morning, lover, she greeted with a grin. Want some breakfast? Love some, I replied, feeling lighter than I had in days. Great. Coffee's already brewing, she said. What's on your agenda today? I've got a meeting with my lawyer, and then I need to handle some bank stuff, I said. What about you? After breakfast, I'll head home and schedule my own lawyer appointment, she said. I'll catch you downstairs. As she left, I got started on my morning routine. After a hot shower, I dressed in my Class C uniform, ensuring everything was in place. When I stepped into the kitchen, Judy's eyes widened. Are you in the Army? She asked, eyeing my ribbons and badges. Marines, I corrected. For another month, anyway. I'm on terminal leave before retirement. She pointed at the ribbons. What are those for? Different things, I said simply, tapping one with 3 small stars. This one? It's for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God, that's a Purple Heart, isn't it? You were wounded in combat. For times, I confirmed. She shook her head in amazement. Where were you deployed? Desert Storm in the 90s, I recounted. Then 6 tours split between Iraq and Afghanistan. And your wife cheated on you while you were at war? She asked, her tone incredulous. And Stephen knew? Yes, I said, my voice steady. What an idiot, she muttered. He'll pay for that. After breakfast, Judy and I stepped outside. She gave me a quick hug and asked me to call her once I got home. I promised I would before heading to my lawyer's office. The meeting went smoothly. After reviewing the evidence, including the prenup and financial records, my lawyer was confident. Given her income, he said, alimony is unlikely. The house and your pension are protected, but the bank account will need to be split per the prenup. When can we file? I asked, eager to get things moving. ASAP, he replied. It might take some extra effort since your wife's in Washington, but we handle that routinely. If all goes smoothly, we could finalize by next week. You'll need to pay the filing fee and my service charge. Settle that with the receptionist on your way out. He handed me a checklist of steps to protect my interests, emphasizing the urgency of visiting the bank. Any questions? He asked. None for now, I said, shaking his hand. Thanks. After paying the fees, I left the office and called Mark on my way to the bank. I just finished with the lawyer, I said. I need to handle some bank stuff, but I'd like to talk more about that job you mentioned. I'll be around, Gunny, Mark replied. Looking forward to it. After our call, he texted me directions to Camp Rollins. At the bank, I discovered Emily hadn't touched the account yet. I withdrew 60% of the funds, opened a new account in my name, and canceled our joint credit cards. After paying off the balances, I ordered new cards for myself. The drive to Camp Rollins, about 35 miles northeast of my house, gave me time to reflect. In just 24 hours, my life had been turned upside down. I'd gone from a husband planning his retirement to a man confronting over 20 years of betrayal. 6 of those years, I'd spent in war zones, risking my life, while Emily built a life with someone else behind my back. Surprisingly, I felt calm. Maybe it was because I approached Emily's betrayal like I faced armed combatants, head-on and without hesitation. Or maybe it was because of Judy. Her energy and honesty were a balm I hadn't realized I needed. Still, I feared jumping into something new so quickly. Time would tell. I arrived at Camp Rollins and drove down a narrow road, passing thick woods and open fields. At the gate, a guard in camouflage, armed and alert, approached my truck. I'm here to see Mark Harris, I said. Name's James Carter. The guard inspected Mark's card and my driver's license before nodding. One moment, sir. He returned to the guard shack and made a call. After a brief exchange, he came back and handed me my documents. Commandant Harris is expecting you, he said. Welcome to Camp Rollins, Gunny Carter. Thanks, I replied as he opened the gate. I gave him a quick wave as I drove in. The camp was immaculate. Wooden buildings lined a central area where men drilled. Lawns were freshly cut, and everything was in perfect order. I felt a sense of familiarity and calm as I parked, ready to see what lay ahead. Finding the camp headquarters, I parked my truck and stepped out, taking in the orderly surroundings. The building had a professional but rugged charm, blending seamlessly into the pristine, forested environment. Inside, an attractive blonde, professionally dressed, greeted me with a warm smile from behind a sleek reception desk. You must be Sergeant Carter, she said, her tone polite but confident. That's me, I replied. Welcome to Camp Rollins, she said, extending a hand briefly before continuing. Commandant Harris is expecting you. Would you like some coffee? Black, please. That'd be great, I said, appreciating the offer. Of course, she said, standing. Please follow me. She led me down a short hallway to a spacious office. Knocking lightly, she announced my arrival. Inside, I saw Mark Harris seated at his desk, his khaki uniform adorned with silver oak leaves, marking his rank as a lieutenant colonel in the Army. He was on the phone but waved me in with a smile. After finishing his call, Mark rose to greet me, extending his hand. Glad you made it, Gunny. Have a seat. Thanks, I said, settling into the chair across from him. A moment later, the receptionist returned with my coffee. I nodded my thanks, took a sip, and savored the warmth and bold flavor. It was exactly what I needed after the long drive. No trouble finding us? Mark asked. None at all. Your directions were spot on, I assured him. Good, he said, leaning back in his chair. Let's get straight to it. Before we go into specifics about the role, let me give you some context about the men we help here. Every man who comes to Camp Rollins is carrying deep wounds. Most have been cheated on, some were physically or emotionally abused, and many endured both. He paused, watching my reaction. The world might call them weak or wimps. It's not politically correct, but I'm here to tell the truth. These men come to us broken. Physically, emotionally, spiritually. They've been exploited by people who preyed on their vulnerabilities, and they feel helpless. That's where we come in. Wow, I said, taking it all in. That's a lot to deal with. It is, Mark agreed. But the first step is focus and strength. We strip them of all electronics, phones, laptops, tablets, you name it. For 3 months, they're completely offline. No social media, no emails, no distractions. They must love that, I said sarcastically. Mark chuckled. It's an adjustment, but it works. Many of these men were so attached to their devices they used them to escape reality. Here, we forced them to confront their issues head-on. How do they stay in touch with their families? I asked. Good question, he said. We assign them a mailbox at a nearby post office, Bonners Ferry or Clark Fork. Mail delivery happens twice a week, and it's deliberately inconvenient to minimize outside disruptions. The camp itself is secure, with armed guards, helicopters, and an electronic perimeter. Unauthorized entry is practically impossible. Have there been any breaches? I asked. A few attempts, Mark admitted, but none successful. I'll include a detailed briefing in the packet I'll give you. Let's just say we take security very seriously. I nodded, impressed. What about the training regimen? The first month is the toughest, Mark said. It's similar to the first phase of boot camp. Physical training starts at 0500 with drills. They move everywhere quickly, under strict guidance from instructors. By the second month, we add counseling. The men begin addressing their emotional trauma while continuing their physical training and learning self-defense. And the third month? I prompted. Reinforcement, Mark said. We build on what they've learned and connect them with legal counsel to handle divorces, custody battles, or other personal matters. He glanced at his watch. Actually, there's a group session happening now. Want to check it out? Sure, I said, curious. Mark led me to another building, holding the door open for me. Inside, a semicircle of men sat facing a female counselor, their expressions tense but attentive. An instructor by the door stiffened slightly at Mark's arrival before nodding at me and resuming his seat. We took seats at the back, observing silently. One man, his voice shaking, described how his wife degraded him, forcing him to service her lovers while mocking his manhood. As tears streamed down his face, his fellow students patted his shoulder, offering quiet support. The counselor listened with empathy, helping him process his emotions. I glanced at the instructor, a burly man with sergeant chevrons on his sleeve. Though his face remained composed, the tension in his jaw betrayed his anger as he watched the student break down. The raw emotion in the room struck a chord with me. These men were bearing their souls, supported by others who truly understood their pain. It was then that I resolved to join this organization. If I could help even one of them regain his strength and dignity, it would be worth it. After the session, Mark signaled for me to follow him. He led me on a tour of the camp, showcasing its facilities. From the gym to the living quarters, everything was impeccably maintained. We visited the instructor's quarters next, where several men in khaki shirts were gathered. Some wore Marine Corps drill instructor chevrons, while others bore Army NCO insignias. These are the backbone of our program, Mark said, introducing me. Gentlemen, this is James Carter. He's considering joining us as our new senior instructor. I spent some time chatting with the team, learning that half were former Marine Corps drill instructors and the other half were ex-Army NCOs. It was clear they were a tight-knit group, deeply committed to the men they trained. So, what do you think? One of them asked. Interested in joining? I glanced at Mark, then replied, Actually, yes. Mark grinned. I've asked James to be our new senior instructor. He's on terminal leave for now, but I'd like him to spend time here getting to know the team and the program. The others nodded in agreement. One extended his hand. Welcome aboard, Gunny. Glad to have you, another added. As I shook hands with the team, I felt a sense of camaraderie I hadn't experienced in years. This was where I belonged. Returning to Mark's office, we discussed the specifics of the job and the camp's activities. As our conversation wrapped up, Mark leaned forward. So, you're in? I nodded firmly. Yes, Mark. I'm in. Mark smiled broadly as he shook my hand. Welcome aboard, James, he said warmly. After a pause, he added, Curious, why'd you decide to join us? I thought back to the counseling session I'd observed. Hearing that man's story during the group session, I began. It hit me that these things actually happen. I always thought they were just exaggerated internet stories. Mark nodded knowingly. Yeah, it's more common than people realize, he said. A lot of men suffer in silence, and we're here to change that. Then, with a grin, he added, By the way, I should probably make you an official offer. He handed me a document, and I was floored by what I read. The salary was significantly higher than what I'd earned in the military, and the benefits package was equally impressive. It didn't take me long to accept. Okay, Mark said, passing me a hefty stack of folders. Some light reading to keep you busy for the next few weeks. I chuckled. Thanks for the homework, I replied. I'll be sure to brush up. Should I bring popcorn to this cow-burning ceremony you mentioned? Mark laughed. You might want to. It's a tradition here, and I think you'll find it cathartic. With that, I grabbed the folders and headed home. The next 3 weeks flew by. Emily received the divorce papers and signed them without any contest. My lawyer informed me that the divorce would be finalized in 30 days. Judy, meanwhile, filed for divorce from Stephen in her home state of Washington, where the process would take around 90 days. I never heard from Emily again, and I had no desire to. 2 weeks after filing, her parents came to collect the belongings she'd chosen from the house. I handed them a cashier's check for her share of the bank accounts, along with all the photos of her I could find. I wanted no reminders of her in my life. Her mother mentioned Emily was too ashamed to face me, and I wasn't surprised. During those weeks, Judy spent her weekends with me, and we had a great time. I took her fishing on Lake Pendorile, and unlike Emily, who never enjoyed fishing, Judy loved it. She even cooked the kokanee salmon we caught, surprising me with how easily she embraced the outdoors. I also made a point to visit Camp Rollins a couple of times each week. I spent time chatting with the instructors, all of whom were combat veterans and divorced like me. A few had started new relationships, which gave me hope for the future. I also attended several group counseling sessions to better understand the students' experiences. Their stories were heartbreaking but inspiring. They were finding strength in each other and the program. One story stuck with me. A student had fled his wife and sought refuge at the camp, only to become a target of an organization called MACE. They'd even attempted an armed assault on the camp, but the vigilant guards, working with an unfamiliar federal agency, had thwarted them. This incident had led to strict new protocols. Any mention of MACE by a potential student required immediate notification of the agency. As the month came to an end, Mark invited me to observe the burning of the cow ceremony, the culmination of the 3-month program. Wearing my Class C uniform, I arrived at the camp as night fell. The ceremony was held in a clearing, where a straw effigy, a crude figure symbolizing their pain, was hoisted onto a pole surrounded by firewood. Each student approached the figure, pinning pictures of their unfaithful wives or exes to it. Once the effigy was prepared, a student was handed a lit torch. "Set the wood ablaze," the instructor commanded. Aye, sir," the student responded, lighting the fire. The flames roared to life, consuming the straw figure as the men chanted, "Burn, burn, burn." They howled and cheered as the effigy collapsed, some even relieving themselves on the smoldering remains. The spectacle was raw and primal, a visceral release of pent-up anger and frustration. "What's the purpose of this?" I asked Mark, who stood beside me. "It's symbolic," he explained. "This ritual offers closure. It allows them to vent their emotions in a controlled, nonviolent way. Tomorrow, they'll graduate as men ready to face the world. Just imagine, 3 months ago, they arrived here broken. Now, they're leaving stronger and more focused." I nodded, understanding the catharsis it provided. For a moment, I pictured Emily's face on that burning effigy. The thought brought a small, ironic smile to my lips. "How's everything at home?" Mark asked, breaking my reverie. "Progressing well," I replied. "The divorce will be finalized soon." "And how are you holding up?" he pressed. "I'm managing," I said honestly. "Better than I expected." "Good to hear," Mark said. "Your break ends in a few days, right?" "Yes, 3 days," I confirmed. "Perfect. I look forward to having you meet the new students," he said. "They arrive in 4 days." "Oh, and you'll need this," he added, handing me a small box. Inside was a pair of gleaming chevrons. "Sergeant Major?" I asked, impressed. "Yes," Mark confirmed. "These mark your role as a senior instructor. Congratulations." "Thank you," I said, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "No," Mark said firmly, smiling. "Thank you." Over the next 4 days, I spent time with Judy. Stephen offered to buy out her share of the house, which she accepted. It seemed he planned to move Emily in, and Judy was eager to leave. I suggested she move in with me, and she readily agreed. Renting a trailer, I helped her pack and move. It would be snug for now, but I was confident we'd make it work. The morning of my first full day at Camp Rollins, Judy made me a lavish breakfast and kissed me goodbye. "Keep them in line," she teased with a smile. "I will," I promised. Arriving at the camp, I adjusted my uniform and stepped out of the truck. A small group of new students milled around in the parking lot, looking disheveled and uncertain. I took a deep breath, straightened my posture, and barked, "What the hell is this? How am I supposed to make men out of this sorry lot? Get them processed before I lose my temper." "Yes, Sergeant," a staff member replied, quickly ushering the group toward the processing area. Turning, I spotted Mark watching with a wide grin. "Excellent start," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Welcome to Camp Rollins."